No days off for Mark Zeigler. So San Diego State, has had a crazy 3-week run from Vegas to Spokane to Boston with all these turnarounds. And then the news never stops. And Mark's been writing about it throughout the course of this quote unquote off season. It hasn't even been a week. And Mark Zeigler does a great job on the Aztecs beat for the Union-Tribune. He's back with us right now, John and Jim. San Diego Sports 760. Mark, you wrote about this, and I found it really interesting. Chris Acker, who called it a dream job, the chance to go to Long Beach State. So a wonderful opportunity, obviously, for an Aztec assistant to become a head coach, and a really good job in the Big West. But you look at it from the San Diego State perspective, what type of coach, in your estimation, will they be looking for to replace him on their staff?
Well, it's going to be interesting. I mean, they have a pretty good track record at replacing coaches. I mean, when Jay Morris left, the Rod Palmer left, Tony Bland left, Justin Hudson left. And every time, Marvin Menzies, if you want to go back even further, every time they've been able to replace them. And there's kind of two ways I think they can go. One is sort of in-house in the family. That would be a guy like maybe Tony Bland back. His show Cause is up this year. He's available. Maybe a guy like Tim Shelton, who's been at Fresno State, Oregon State, and then Colorado State this past season, would be another option. Or they could just go and do what they did with Chris Acker and hire a guy who doesn't have ties to San Diego State, but just use their best sense. And, maybe they want a guy who's really offensive oriented, who brings sort of a fresh perspective to modern offense or analytics type guy. Or do they want a guy who just sort of exudes their culture and is going to, just kind of pick up where Chris left off. So there's a lot of ways they can go. I know that Brian Dutch is going to be at the Final Four this week interviewing candidates, and we'll see what they come up with.
Moving over to the players here, we know Jaedon, Darion, and Jay Powell are all gone. They'd have no more years of eligibility left. But Lamont, Reese, and Micah Parrish, they do. When do you expect us to have clarity on their decisions? And do you think all three of those guys will be back, or one of those guys will be back, or could you see a scenario where they're all gone next season?
Well, I think what's kind of unique for them is, the transfer portal opened 2 weeks ago yesterday. And you'd think they'd want to make some quick decisions, and if they're going to get in the portal, get into it. And you'd think San Diego State would want quick answers, because if they need to replace them, they need to get in the portal. They're 2 weeks behind. The problem is, there's two problems. Number one is there's spring break this week at San Diego State. So most of the team is gone. It's been a long season. They probably want to go spend time at home and hang out with their parents and friends. And number two, there's a dead period in terms of bringing potential players into campus, or you going to visit them, from Thursday through the Final Four and through the following Friday. So that kind of puts some crimps in the plan, probably slows things down a little bit. I suspect we'll start hearing some decisions next week when players get back from spring break. I think I would expect Reese Waters to be back. Right now, I would expect Micah Parrish not to be back. And Lamont Butler, as I wrote about today, is the mystery. I don't think anybody knows. I'm not sure he even knows, because he's really been good about compartmentalizing the season and then dealing with it afterwards and after spring break. And so I think it's going to be a little while before we have an answer with him.
Mark Zeigler from the UT with us right now, and John and Jim. You've also written about NIL, and it seems like San Diego State is much better positioned than they have been previously, but then again, it's a bit of an arms race in NIL, and as you get better positioned, so do programs potentially around you. So, Mark, do you have? I don't have this perspective, and I wonder if you could provide it for our listeners. Like, how does San Diego State, relatively speaking, compare to other power programs that are considered like top 30 national programs? And then how do they compare maybe to some other programs in the Mountain West Conference?
In the Mountain West, they're going to be near the top, but I don't think they're going to be at the top. I can see a program like New Mexico, maybe UNLV, having a little bit more. I think they'd probably be comparable with Boise State, maybe past them. And again, you just don't know.
Yep.
It's this big mystery, and you hear these numbers, and you don't know if to believe them or not. And then, a program like Nevada, they might be a little bit ahead of. But nationally, and I think, after two straight Sweet 16s, the run last year, 4 Sweet 16s since 2011, I think San Diego State thinks of itself, and it should, as being a power conference program and competing nationally and not just regionally in the Mountain West. I think you can see that mentality with the conference. the rest of the conference is much more conference centric. San Diego State is kind of viewing beyond the horizon. And so in that regard, though, they're not competitive. I mean, they're competitive, but they're not at the top. The top programs are going to have 2.5, 3, 4 in some cases. Most programs are going to probably have between 1.5 and 2. And so that's why you hear a guy like Jeff Smith say, look, we're doing okay, but I mean, we don't want to be the reason why players say no to us. It happened last year and it could happen again this year. And so there's a big campaign now to sort of bump that up towards the 1.5 range where they feel a little bit more comfortable.
Is this NIL tournament going to happen in your opinion or not?
It's going to be interesting. I think it's definitely a 50-50 proposition at this point. I think there'll be some more clarity in the next week or two. If it happens, that really helps San Diego State because it could add another $1 million to the NIL budget for next year, and that puts them in that national picture. And part of maybe their recruiting with NIL might be predicated on whether they get in that or not, because the type of player they can go after may change if they get that extra boost in income. Now, it'll be interesting to me. I mean, I've heard these numbers floated, but I also have been to so many, and you have too, John. You've been to so many of these non-conference tournaments, whether they're in Vegas or wherever, and they're in empty arenas. They're on ESPN Plus. There aren't really any sponsors. I just don't know how they're going to generate that kind of money and guarantee it to schools. So I think that's another issue. And the third issue is all these schools are already committed to MTEs or multi-team events, non-conference tournaments. You only can be in one per year. And so how are they going to do this with those commitments already made for 24-25?
Mark, I kind of see it as like a twofold win potentially for a program like San Diego State if it happens, because not only do you get the NIL resources, which could benefit your current roster and like the way you recruit here this offseason, but you get the advantages of scheduling. And scheduling is so nuanced and important, and I don't think a lot of people understand it. And the Mountain West is changing their scheduling next year, more conference games next year. But if something like this happens, you wrote about it, you're not talking about good programs in this event. You're talking about some of the top 10, 15 programs probably for 2024, 25, right? If this thing happens.
Absolutely. And that takes care of, it's like going to Maui,
right?
Except you don't have to fly to Maui. And, in Maui, you're going to get 3 really good games in 3 days. And the rest of your non-conference schedule is kind of either building up to that or recovering from it. And you don't have to worry about it. They are already going to have Gonzaga coming to Diaz Arena. There's talk. We'll see if the BYU thing gets done again, that series gets renewed. And so, that would solve a lot of their problems, like you said, right off the bat. And then, they could worry about the conference schedule, which is going to be a beast next year, just in terms of dates. Maybe not so much in terms of teams, but just in terms of accommodating all that.
This is kind of a question that's kind of crazy to even ask, I feel like, because he just signed a contract extension with a $10 million buyout. But there's been reports from, USC reporters saying that Brian Dutcher's name has been heating up here for the vacancy at USC. Odds that happens, or is that just like a no-go with the logistics here and the contract that he just signed with San Diego State, the extension?
Well, I think what that is people saying, wow, he's a really, really good coach. He's in Southern California. That'd be great to have him for our program. And the USC mentality is we get whatever we want. We just go out and buy him. And then when they see what the price tag is, like you said, $10.2 million, I don't think anybody in the country is paying that, particularly in the current climate where players are starting to say, wait a minute, what about us? We deserve a bigger piece of this pie. And not only are you paying coaches $3 or $4 million a year, but then you pay a $10 million buyout. I'm not even sure that happens at USC. So I would highly doubt it. I think when you sign a contract that has a $10.2 million buyout, you pretty much have, are you resigned? I'm not resigned isn't the right word, but you're committed to the fact that you're going to be at that place. And so I think I'd be really shocked if I wouldn't be surprised if people have interest, but I'd be shocked if it got very far past wait a minute, what's the buyout?
Right. Yeah. To your point, the interest makes a ton of sense.
Like, but, he's a really good coach.
Again, the successes he's having on the Mesa, speak for themselves. Speaking of which, I don't know if you saw this, Mark. Weiss, long-time basketball reporter, saying Bronny James is. Well, I don't think this is a San Diego State story at all, but Is that intriguing to you? Like, what do you think could be next for Bronny? Again, coaching change at SC. His father's obviously in Southern California. What do you think could be next for Bronny?
Yeah, I think he's probably just evaluating his options. I think the initial plan, if you went back to a year ago, right now, was for him to play 1 year of college, have a full year of college, a full summer and full fall and the full season, and then turn pro. And the dream was to play with his father.
Yep.
I think the heart issue derailed that. It really shortened and abbreviated his prep for the season. And, he's on a talented veteran roster and he played, but he didn't get maybe the frontline playing time that he felt like maybe he deserved to take that next step to the NBA. So I see all options on the table. I don't see someone like San Diego State getting involved in him. He's not a bad player in the sense that he is unselfish. He's a very good passer, committed to defense. But I think all that external stuff coming to a team like San Diego State, which is such a team in the truest sense of the word, is just an enormous distraction. And they never really had, even Jaedon LeDee, who was an All-American, you wouldn't know that he was the special player on the team. He just was another guy on the team if you were around the team. And so I think that's kind of the way they operate. I don't see a program like San Diego State going after him. But those programs that deal with high-profile players and are used to it or set up for that will certainly be interested.
I thought that was going to be my last question. I want to ask one more. Jay, I know we're way off still from the NBA draft. I mean, we have a couple of months. Is he getting drafted, in your opinion? Is there a space in the NBA for Jaedon LeDee to use his skill set, which is pretty unique for his size? But again, he's quote unquote, I guess, undersized as well for that level.
Yeah, I think the biggest drawback for Jaedon is not going to be his skill set. It's not going to be the way the modern NBA game is played, and everyone talks about there's no room for true bigs anymore. It's going to be his age. I mean, I think it'll be 25 when they have the draft, and so that this is a league that likes to draft guys who are 19 and 20 and then develop them. And a guy who's 25, you have to wonder about where his ceiling is. So I think that's the biggest drawback. That said, I know some scouts that love him. And I think he did himself a lot of favors in the NCAA tournament because A, it's a big stage. B, look what he did in the first half. He had 15 points against the number one team in the country, maybe the best team in a generation. And he showed he can hit that outside shot. And that's something that makes him a weapon at his size. Also his ability to handle the ball. And his ability to rebound and be strong. And so I think he has a spot on an NBA team. I don't know if he's a starter or not in the league. It's hard to project that, but I definitely think he's attractive enough that someone's going to draft him.
Great perspective. Mark, we love your coverage of Aztec basketball in the UT. Thanks for hopping on, and we hope to do it again here throughout the offseason. So thank you.
Yeah, I think it'll be a busy offseason. It's coming that way now in college basketball.
It really is incredible. Appreciate it, Mark. I go back to last offseason. Mark wrote so much in the days and weeks following the national championship. It didn't slow until like the true summer. He went from like April 3rd until July writing routinely about news related to San Diego State, and it feels like that's how this offseason started as well. He's written a ton since last Thursday's loss to Connecticut in Boston.